Díochid a chara, tá mé arás arisht. Hey friend, it's me, Julian, and I am back again with another episode after a few weeks. I hope that you'll enjoy this episode about the goddess and the Saint Brigid. So, Malta Chivray, let's go. Gawa Malta Vrija, Ianwan le Érenn, Ianwan le Gach Tír Mulamish Galéir I proclaim the praises of Brigid. She is dear to Ireland. She is dear to every country. Let us all join in her praises. Henri MacGiala Choel. It's early and few are awake. The birds themselves have not yet stirred. Coals smolder within ashes, ready to alight once more. The air is ripe with potential. Outside, the petitioner waits, feet planted within a circle of oaks, watching the east. The air is crisp, and the petitioner's breath makes mist that floats into the sky and dissipates. The stars are still up there, fuzzy with distance, but they weaken. The first hints of light appear over the horizon, beyond the wildflower garden. This moment is caught in the liminal place between night and day. It is the precursor to an idea, a time to hold one's breath in anticipation. The light grows and glows. It bleeds out from the trees and the clouds like spurting ink, stretching its rosy fingers to the corners of the world. Light paints every canvas, regardless of its condition. In this are all equal. Here, it's painting the garden. It's painting the statue of the saint. It's painting the eternal flame that waits within the center, safe behind glass. The eternal flame of Brigid is kept today by her nuns in Kildare, resurrected in the early 1990s from the darkness imposed by English monarch Henry VIII, who had it extinguished in the 16th century. The light of Brigid is kept by many more than the Brigidine sisters. Brigid, the goddess, Brigid, the woman, and Brigid, the saint. She is the great transformer, hammering souls as she hammers the iron that defined the age in which she lived as goddess. Today she helps guide the transformations of many different sorts, her love tough and firm, but fair and just. More than one transgender person has called for her aid in their transition, and her aid she provides, as goddess and as saint, to the poor and the underrepresented, the hungry and the sick, and those caught in the tides of change. She was the first to keen in Ireland, overcome by grief for the death of her son. She was the goddess of poetry, words which could ruin a person's reputation or propel them to leadership. She was an abbess in Ireland, maintaining power in a patriarchal system. She overcame powers greater than she through her intelligence and through her magic. She performed abortions and coaxed wombs to produce. She was the sun. She is the sun. She is Brigid of Kildare. The Sanus Cormac, or Cormac's narrative, an early Irish glossary written somewhere in the 1800s, explains that Brigid was the daughter of Andaya, the Dagda, or rather she was 3 daughters, all of equal age, a triplicate. These sisters were goddesses of 3 extremely important aspects: ironwork, poetry, and medicine. In today's age, we don't think about these aspects very much, but their importance to the people of the time cannot be overstated. Consider the impact of smithing, and particularly with iron. Weapons, transportation, and tools were all shaped and improved by the ability to craft with iron. Iron was also powerful in the other worlds, and was used as protection against evil, and as a ward against the Sidhe. Courtney Weber, in her book Brigid, History, Mystery, and Magic of the Celtic Goddess, compares smithing, and specifically ironworking, to the internet today in its far-reaching and potent impact. It was revolutionary. Poetry of that day was not the poetry as we conceive of it. It would not have been words scribbled on a page or typed up in a book of poems, but rather a living, dynamic performance which shaped or destroyed the most important aspect of a hero or ruler, their reputation. In a society in which all news, history, and myth was relayed orally, the impact of spoken word was huge. Think, even today, of the impact of nasty rumors in an office setting, and extrapolate that to an entire region. Both weaponry and reputation were hugely important to the society of the time, which did engage in battle and warfare and held heroes to high esteem. So, too, was her third aspect, one which was as much a part of those battles as it was everyday life: healing. Her domain over medicine touched every member of these societies, not just the rulers and warriors. She gave this gift in her many springs, which became holy wells that still provide succor to the people of Ireland today. All of these aspects revolve around the blazing, eternal flame that accompanies her, even into today. Smithing requires fire to make metals pliable. Healing needs it for cauterizing, for sanitizing, and for warming. And poetry is the soul's fire, the divine light of inspiration. We don't know how long she's been around. She could be tens of thousands of years old, a personification or deification of natural elements. She could be the culmination of hundreds of regional goddesses. Indeed, many deities of the past were highly regional. This can account for variation in stories, even among those describing the saint. Her name likely means exalted one or high one, referring to highness quite literally, the tops of hills and mountains, and also figuratively. She is great and powerful. There is no etymological evidence that this name means fiery arrow, a moniker often heard in pagan circles. The term is cognate with the Vedic goddess Berhatti, both terms stemming from Proto-Indo-European Berhatti. It was an epithet to a goddess of the dawn, Duchas, written in the Rig Vedas 3,500 years ago. It means, as Brigid means, high one, or exalted one, and was a way to address her like one would say Your Highness in more recent times. This name, Brigid, was a title applied to many other goddesses, and even people of high status. Her name today is Brigid, bride, bridie, breed, or others of a similar construction. But if Brigid was a title, could her name have been something else? Given her title and aspects of fire and new life, it is quite probable that she is a sun goddess. In Ireland, one such goddess was Áine, which maybe sounds a bit like Ushas, or other Indo-European dawn goddesses like Eos or Eostra. Áine, remember, was possibly linked with and opposite to the Cailleach, the earthy, stormy creatrix hag of winter, who could also be the moon opposite Áine's role as the sun. Brigid and the Cailleach also rotated around each other, regulating the changeover of seasons from winter to summer. Áine is, however, associated with Lunasa, the late summer harvest festival, where Brigid's festival is Imbolc, or Imbolc, the start of spring. The cross, today used in Imbolc celebrations, and widely known to be a symbol of Brigid, was a sunwheel whose 4, or sometimes 3, Arms represented a wheel in motion. Such wheels are present in many other Indo-European sun god and goddess legends, where the sun is dragged across the sky in a chariot. Like other sun goddesses, Brigid's worship included an eternal flame. A perpetual fire burned in the temple of the pagan goddess Brigid, in the same spot where her flame would burn for the saint, much like the flame of Roman Vesta. The flame was cared for only by women, and was contained within a circular hedge enclosure. If a man dared to enter, he'd soon regret it, for the goddess, and later the saint, dealt swift punishment. Further afield from Ireland, she could be manifested in the British goddess Brigantia. One theory is that her arrival in Ireland was due to the flight of British Druids. Those Druids were members of the tribe Brigantes, located in what is now Yorkshire, named for their goddess. They invaded Ireland, or fled Britain, depending on your viewpoint, in the 1st century CE, according to much later Christian authors. There were many shrines to her in Britain, and many sacred natural places named for her, such as the Brant River in Wales. Indeed, as Celtic culture was not contained to the islands, neither was she. Brigantio is the former name of an Austrian town. There are also towns in Hungary and France bearing her name. She, Brigantia, was often shown with a helmet or spear post-Roman invasion. Prior to the coming of the Romans, there were no known depictions of her. Further, they associated her with Minerva, or Athena to the Greeks, a goddess of wisdom, and a goddess of strategic warfare. Brigid of Ireland herself was involved in warfare. She was said to have flown over the battlefield like Baal Chaha, the Scald Crow and goddess of war. The saint did the same, hovering over the army of Leinster during the battle between Llechóin and Llechwoga. And, of course, she was present for the battles of Moytura, the struggle between the Tuatha De Danann and the Fomorians, which would determine the future of Ireland. She married Breis, whose father was Fomorian, but whose mother was Éireann of the Tuatha. When Nuada was found unfit to rule, Breis ruled as king of Ireland. This was fine, at first. Breis himself was described as a great and beautiful figure, his name even becoming synonymous with greatness. This changed, however, and his rule saw the Dagda and Olma in chains, enslaved, and forced to perform hard manual labor. His downfall came at the hands, or lips, of a bard. Breis's household had been cold and unwelcoming to company for a time now. Indeed, quote, "Never did either man or woman go from him drunk or happy." But your regular man or woman has little power. A bard, though, holds the reputation of a king in their breath. A poet came seeking hospitality at Breis's house, and was made to sleep in a narrow, dark, cold hovel of a shack, with naught but 3 tiny dry cakes to eat, and nothing to drink and make him merry. He could hardly believe this injustice, and composed the following poem in response. Without food speedily on a platter, without a cow's milk whereon a calf thrives, without a man's habitation after the staying of darkness, be that the luck of Breis MacEladon. Naught exists now Breis's wealth. And so it came to pass as the bard said it would. Breis, the husband of the goddess of poetry, was the first person ever satirized in Ireland. Breis was booted out of his office and, nursing a grudge, joined his father's people. He mustered his forces among them, and engaged the Tuatha in battle, where he lost his life. Brigid lost her husband. So, too, did she lose the son they had together. Perhaps her son, Ruadán, joined the Fomorians along with his father. It certainly seems he was well known to the Tuatha, as his presence in their camps caused no alarm. A friendly foe, he worked against them behind the scenes, and it was his undoing. Here is his death, recorded in the Second Battle of Moytura. Now that was damaging to the Fomora, and they picked a man to reconnoitre the battle and the practices of the Tuatha, Ruadhán, the son of Bresh and of Brig, the daughter of the Dagda, because he was a son and a grandson of the Tuatha. Then he described to the Fomora the work of the smith, and of the carpenter, and of the brazier, and the 4 physicians who were around the well. They sent him back to kill one of the Aesdalna, Gwivnu. He requested a spear point from him, its rivets from the brazier, and its shaft from the carpenter, and everything was given to him as he asked. Now there was a woman there grinding weapons, Cron, the mother of Fianlach, and she ground Ruadhán's spear. So the spear was given to Ruadhán by his maternal kin, and for that reason a weaver's beam is still called the spear of the maternal kin in Ireland. But after the spear had been given to him, Ruadhán turned and wounded Gwivnu. He pulled out the spear and hurled it at Ruadhán, so that it went through him, and he died in his father's presence in the Fomorian assembly. Brig came and keened for her son. At first she shrieked. In the end she wept. Then, for the first time, weeping and shrieking were heard in Ireland. Brigid, a goddess of healing, a goddess who protected pregnant women, was herself a mother who could not protect nor heal her son. It is not an experience unique to goddesses to be unable to help someone whom we dearly love and who clearly needs our help, but who refuses to take it. Her pain manifested itself in her keening, coming from the Irish word cuina, which means crying. It is a raw, brutal, and spontaneous expression of deep grief. It would have consisted of wailing, spoken word, chanting, and some elements of song, such as rhythmic beating or singing. It allowed the release of emotions too large to contain. It also allowed the release of the spirit of the deceased, who knew, by the sound of the keening, that it could depart. The practice continued in Ireland until recent times. This goddess of life, of spring and crops and cattle and plenty, also knew death. Curiously, the text I've read from the Second Battle of Moytura ends with this line, quote, "Now she is the Brig who invented a whistle for signaling at night." This seems to tie back into a function of hers, of wisdom in strategic battle. As a goddess, she was, like Lugh, Ildalnach, possessing proficiency in all the arts. The Romans described her as Minerva in similar terms as they described Lugh, whom they saw as Mercury. They, the two, were worshipped above all others. There is some speculation today that Saint Patrick took on Lugh's mantle. It would make sense, as Saint Brigid appears to have taken the mantle of this great goddess. "20 nuns, including Brigid herself, would have guarded the eternal flame, tending it each day. 20 priestesses would have done the same. Though the flame was fed with wood each night, the ashes were said to have never increased. This flame could not be fanned with the breath. That was forbidden, according to Giraldus's Topographia Hiberniae. The flame, within its hedge-framed sanctuary, could not be approached by men. Even after Brigid's death, she continued to tend the flame, taking her turn on the 20th night, when the last sister would say, 'Brigid, guard your fire. This is your night.' Night came at last for the eternal flame, which was extinguished when her sisters were evicted from their cathedral and home by the Tudors, who sought to bring Ireland under their yoke by extinguishing the flame of its religion. But knowledge of her never left the island, and the fire itself returned. It was relit by her re-established Brigidine order in 1993, and it's kept even today with them in Solus Vriga, her sanctuary in Kildare. We don't know much about the woman named Brigid, nor even if she was indeed named Brigid, or if it was a title she elected to take. Her stories, recorded in the various lives works written about her after her death, such as Life of Saint Brigid by Cogitosus, or On the Life of Saint Brigid by an unknown author, center upon her miraculous deeds. She lived somewhere between 455 CE and 525 CE, born to a slave woman and her master in Fóchart Werhevna on a Wednesday, the 8th day of the tree moon. She was born amidst liminality. Her mother, Broashech, gave birth with 1 foot inside the doorway and 1 foot outside, and in the brilliant glowing dawn, Brigid entered this world. Her father, Duchas, whose name refers to darkness, was a pagan. Her mother, Broashech, was Christian. Duchas' wife became jealous of the enslaved woman whose master's affections had been forced upon her. His wife bade him get rid of the woman and the child she carried within her, and he did. A passing druid took charge of Broashech, and they moved to Connacht. Years later, through an act of miraculous production of butter, Brigid secured her mother's freedom. In the meantime, though, she worked. When she worked, everything she touched was improved. Every store of food which she saw and served used to grow. She bettered the sheep, and she healed the blind. Often, these stores she increased, she gave to the hungry and needy, but what had been given was always replenished, as if it had never been decreased. She was given back to her father and returned to Ivala, Offaly, where he soon grew tired of her generosity, as it often came at his personal expense. She gave away anything of value to whomever needed it. Duchas decided to get rid of her again, before she got rid of all of his wealth. He brought her on his carriage to the King of Leinster, then went inside to propose this exchange, leaving behind his weapon, as was typical. As he was in, a poor unfortunate beggar came by, and Brigid, with mercy and love in her heart, gave away her father's fine sword. When he returned, her father was so mad he made to hit her. Luckily, the king's daughter saw this, and yelled at him to stop. Her father rebuked Duchas, saying he ought to be proud of a daughter like that. She stayed on with the royal family in Leinster as a servant girl for some time. It wasn't long before her father wanted to have her married off, all the same. She had no desire to marry, not to any man, but he was persistent. In determination, she gouged her own eyeball out of her head. Only then did he relent, and agreed to let her take the veil. Miraculously, her eye grew back, as so much that she touched restored itself. Rather than remaining a nun in service to God, she was made an abbess, with power over communities of both men and women. It was, we're told, an accident. That seems, to me, like a way to explain away the great power she held, rather than exemplifying her ability and merit. To say, yes, of course, the only way she could have achieved such status is through a mistake, because assuredly, her position was powerful, and her holding it was unusual in that time. In any case, the wrong verbiage was read over her and conferred power upon her. This is what was written in On the Life of Saint Brigid to describe the incident. It came to pass, then, through the grace of the Holy Ghost, that the form of ordaining a bishop was read over Brigid. Macalia said that the order of a bishop should not be conferred on a woman. Dixit bishop male. No power have I in this matter, inasmuch as by God hath been given unto her this honour beyond every woman. Hence it is that the men of Ireland give the honour of bishop to Brigid's successor. What God had caused to transpire, namely, the conference of power on Brigid, no human could revoke. Her appointment to this post set into motion a line of female religious leadership in Kildare. The woman who would become the leader of Kildare Abbey after Brigid's death, Darludach, may have been her lover, or she may not have been. Alton, an Irish monk and later abbot, writes in his Life of Brigid that Darludach was a favoured pupil of Brigid, and they shared a bed. One night, Darludach left that bed to meet a man. Brigid prayed for an answer, and that answer was to place hot coals in Darludach's shoes, which she felt keenly as she tried to put on her shoes to leave. Thus by fire she put out fire, and by pain extinguished pain, says Ultan. Darludach was stopped in her pursuit, and confessed to Brigid the next morning. This sounds like a clear warning against sins of the flesh. The work itself says, quote, Saint Brigid then told her, Darludach, she was now safe from the fire of passion here, and the fire of hell thereafter, implying this punishment was in her own service, to stop her from sinning and going to hell. There could have been a degree of jealousy involved if allegations that they were lovers hold any merit. They were indeed very close, so much so that upon Brigid's death, Darludach wished to die with her. Brigid forbade it, promising that Darludach would die a year after her, and she did, to the day. She also became sainted, and her feast day is Brigid's own. This is a bit more than mere friendship. It sounds, as it was described in various other works, like Anam Cara, soul friends. Their bond was deep. Today, Darludach is not remembered much as a saint or holy figure, perhaps overshadowed by her soulmate, Brigid. Brigid, a brilliant blazing fire, would outshine anyone. The saint is, as the goddess is, associated with fire, and has been since her infancy. Recall that she was born at dawn. Recall, too, the eternal flame that was kept in Kildare, tended by her nuns, a continuation from her pagan iteration, burning into today. One day, when the infant Brigid was left in her home, a massive fire suddenly sprang from it. The neighbors rushed in alarm to help, fearing for the baby's life, but when they arrived, they found no fire at all. The house was undamaged. They concluded that what they had seen was the manifestation of the Holy Spirit in the child, the brilliance of which shot out from the home like a beam. As an adult, she was in the habit of hanging her cloak on sunbeams. She did this one rainy day while St. Brendan was visiting, and of course he tried to do the same. His cloak fell to the ground, while hers remained aloft on the sunbeam, drying with its help. This was not the first or only time she would outshine Ireland's other saints, particularly Brendan. St. Brendan the Navigator saw many wonders of the world, and did not hesitate in telling stories about them to rapt audiences. In one story, Brigid humbled him while he was giving such a speech. As he was regaling a crowd with his stories, Brigid stepped forward and asked him if he had talked to any of the marvelous creatures he'd seen. Brendan was confused, and asked her why he would do such a thing, and wasn't it enough that he'd seen these creatures? She answered that they were God's creatures, too, that all living things were worthy of the respect. This took the gab out of him, and he found himself bragging less. She herself did not brag in such a way, though she certainly had the miracles to back up such bragging. Brendan came upon two whales fighting one day. It was clear, after a while, that the smaller whale was losing, and would soon perish. In desperation, the small whale called out to St. Brigid for help, which it received, and it escaped. Brendan was stunned. He was right there, and the whale didn't ask for his help. She was the more powerful saint, though she didn't revel in this nor blame Brendan. Her mind was fully devoted to her god, and his attention, she told him, had to be diverted at times for his own safety on the open seas. This, she said, was why the whale called to her, not him. She challenged authority, using her smarts to overcome obstacles in a world which many men held legal power, and many women did not. In this way, she was able to secure land for herself, her nuns, and her animals. One story, from Duchas tells this version. One day Saint Brigid went to the King of Leinster and asked him to give her a piece of land which she wanted to build a church on. At first he refused her, but she asked him to give her as much as her garment would cover. She then spread the garment on the ground, and it then started spreading and spreading until it nearly covered the whole of Leinster. The king told her to stop, and he gave her the land to build the church. In many versions of the story, the local ruler believes he's humoring her, and there is a degree of mockery in his agreement. He is soon made foolish as her power is revealed. The land covered by the cloak is called the Curragh, and is to this day used for grazing, among other things. Her power she used in matters of justice, and in matters of women. Saint Brigid performed abortions. At least one miraculous abortion that we have a record of, in Cogitosus's life, which says, "A certain woman who had taken the vow of chastity fell, through youthful desire of pleasure, and her womb swelled with child. Brigid, exercising the most potent strength of her ineffable faith, blessed her, causing the fetus to disappear, without coming to birth, and without pain. She faithfully returned the woman to health, and to penance." This pregnancy was not the result of rape, and the abortion was not performed only because she was a victim of a crime, as seems to be the requirement for understanding involving abortions among some today. She just wanted to have sex, and she did, and she got pregnant. And knowing this, Brigid performed the abortion. Brigid was not the only saint in Ireland to perform abortions. Saint Ciaran made the sign of the cross over the womb of a nun who had been assaulted, and caused the fetus to vanish. There are, in total, 4 saints who are recorded as having performed abortion miracles. These were holy people, appointed by God, doing God's work, and part of that work was providing abortions. Entwined with Imbolc runs a thread of fertility. Brigid is responsible for the removal of life from the womb, as well as the addition of it. She prayed over the barren womb of her aunt, Fointia, who then became fruitful. The very day of her own birth, the infant Brigid revived the infant Prince of Tir Conal, who had been born dead. In Scotland she was summoned when the delivery time was near, the midwife taking the bride fair's position on their knee. Imbolc is an ancient part of the cycle of life in Ireland. The cycle continues as life continues, adapting to new challenges but maintaining its essence. It has, as some other pagan festivals, and as Brigid herself, been adopted into the Christianity of the area. So dear was she, and so important her day, that both persist. Imbolc, celebrated on the last night of January into the 1st of February, is the start of spring in Ireland, and is associated, in its essence, with life, its beginning, its growth, and its protection. The term itself, Imbolc or Imbolc, may refer to several related things: ewe's milk or lactation, purification, or pregnancy. Imullig means, in modern Irish, in belly. There are countless regional differences in the historic celebration of Imbolc, few of which are continued into the modern era, but she is not lost in modernity. The Brigid's Cross, that 4-armed or 3-armed sunwheel created from rushes or reeds, is still widely made throughout the country today. Within the last few years, Saint Brigid's feast day, which is Imwalig, has been made a national holiday. She is dear to women. She is dear to Ireland. She is dear to the world. The Brigid's cross would have been a part of the set of rituals and traditions practiced that night. The materials were some natural creation. Wood was said to have been used in Kildare, and some crosses were made of the last sheath of the previously harvested crop, but the majority were made of rushes, which were, at times, gathered in sacred silence before being brought into the home. Once inside, they were sometimes placed underneath the food before being formed into crosses. In some locations, the crosses were placed within the home, above the door or in the thatch. The old crosses may be left or replaced. In some locations, the crosses were burnt, and their ashes spread on the fields. Some crosses were placed in barns. There is here a clear association with both fertility of the land and protection of it. As she was the flame, she could protect a home from the flame. The design of the cross itself predates Christianity. It is the sun wheel, its legs portraying motion, or it may be associated with rain, both of which figure greatly into the promotion of crops. The diamond or lozenge design of some crosses can be found on ancient goddesses, and in Brú-na-Bóinne, where Newgrange and Knowth sit. She is said, during the thin hours between January 31st and February 1st, to visit and bless each house, a saintly Santa Claus. With her is her red-eared white cow, whose colors signify magic or the other world. This practice is unique to her. To prepare for her visit, people left out items for her to use or her companion cow to consume. Straw on the doorstep for her comfort when she was kneeling before the house, blessing it. A sheaf of corn or an oaten cake on the doorstep in Donegal. Hay left out for her cow, or inside an extra place is set at the table for her. In thanks, or more accurately, because of her intrinsic goodness and desire to help, she blesses the homes or items left for that purpose. A brat bhríde, Brigid's cloak, a small piece of fabric, is left on the windowsill overnight for blessing and is used throughout the year for healing, particularly illnesses of the head, such as toothache or headache. Pregnant people use this blessed cloth for assistance in delivery or to help the child latch onto the breast. So precious was this blessed cloth that some folks brought it with them when they emigrated. A similar practice involves Bealtaine, where a cloth left out overnight collects dew, which can be used to improve one's looks. Divination is practiced during this holiday. The future is uncertain and dangerous, so any assurance people could gather to them, they would. There were a variety of things one could do to define the future at this time of year. Pieces of cloth were also left out for this purpose. The cloth would be measured the night before, then set out and remeasured in the morning. If it had grown, luck was assured. If it had shrunk, a death in the family, or bad luck at the very least, would be coming. One could use candles to determine if there would be a death in the family. Each family member would be assigned a candle, and those candles then lit. The first to go out was the first person to die. Reading the ashes by the hearth could provide some information about the household's luck. If the ashes were disturbed on the morning of February 1st, it meant Brigid had been by to bless the house, and good luck was assured. If the ashes weren't disturbed, well, she hadn't seen fit to visit. If one had fallen out of her favor, there were ways to regain it, at least in Scotland. One could bury a cock alive in a place where 3 streams met, then burn incense in a fire. Sounds quite a bit like sacrifice. However, other accounts in the literature and lore indicate that Brigid loved animals. She is associated with many of them: cows, of course, and ewes, foxes, and even boars. The eve of Imbolc would see a reenactment of what the people hoped would come to pass. Images or dolls represented Brigid were made and paraded around the house or around the bounds of the property. At times, a daughter of the house would dress herself up as the saint instead. A call and response would play out at the door to the home. Brigid's representation would call to the inhabitants of the house, and they would answer, Shebaha, Shebaha Namra Ushla. She is welcome, welcome to the noble lady. This ritual would be performed 3 times in Jeshel, or sunwise, direction, an ancient pattern for an ancient being. Sometimes the effigy of the saint was carried around by a group of young, rowdy boys, called the Biddy Boys. These boys would go door to door asking for change or small gifts of food or drink. In return, they'd sing or dance and bestow the blessing of Brigid on the household. Turning them away with no hospitality was bad form, and assuredly a way to earn yourself bad luck. Brigid herself was a giving woman, and refusing them would be going against the spirit of her charity. From the time of her birth, where she gave life to the Prince of Tir Chonel, to her youth, where she increased everything she touched, and where she redistributed the wealth of her father, to her adulthood, where she traveled Ireland, healing and blessing those who had no other recourse, Brigid gave charitably. It was said in Fort that Brigid's cow was the Glasgevnin, the magical cow who produced and freely gave enormous amounts of milk, so long as it wasn't wasted. This story from Duchas is one of thousands of examples. When Saint Brigid was a young girl, she lived with her people in Kildare. She was very fond of milch cows, calves, and dairy farming. She was very kind to the poor. Every time she made a churning, she divided the butter into 12 parts. One day, she went a long way from home, and she was going back to Kildare. In her early days, she used to go a long way on journeys from home. On that journey, night came on her, and she got lodging. The widow was poor, and she had her cow and calf in one corner of the house. They had nothing to give her for her supper, so they killed the calf and cooked it for her. Next morning when the widow awoke, Saint Brigid was gone on her journey, and there was a beautiful calf with the cow far bigger and nicer than the other calf. Like the cauldron of the Dagda, Brigid replenishes what is spent. She gives, even after her death. Today there are thousands of holy wells scattered around Ireland. Like British Solace's restorative baths, Brigid's own springs heal. They are, many of them, as ancient as the goddess, and, as had transpired in Kildare, worship in her holy places moved seamlessly from one of her expressions to another. Even today, Brigid heals petitioners through her wells. Some of these wells have had elaborate rituals, called patterns, associated with them, complex movements and actions that would unlock the well's healing ability. Cludies, small pieces of fabric, can also be left at the sites to promote healing. Today, she is still vitally important to the people of Ireland. She is important to the people in many lands. She was so important that her presence was repurposed, not forgotten and gone by the wayside like the hundreds of other local spirits and Celtic deities whose names we no longer know. As goddess, her domains covered the most important aspects of life in that society: revolutionary ironworking, consequential poetry, and all-encompassing healing. As saint, she encouraged growth and protected life, while encouraging justice and performing abortions. She helped people equally, visiting every house during Imbolc, not just the rich, and not just the poor. She held power, always she held power, even when power was denied to many like her. Gawe molta vrija, Érenn I le Érenn, Érenn le gach tír I, Mullamish galéir I. Well, Shania Kharja, Tasilam Garvan Shiv Soltas on Pod Curla Show. Well, that's it, friends. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and I hope to see you next time, where I will be talking about something that I don't know yet. Slán Gafal.